The phone call came late at night. The kind of phone call that people never forget, the kind that shatters your entire world with just a few words. But for Lillian Harper, the shock didn't come from the police siren she heard on the other end of the line. No. The horror came from knowing that her son's life, the family she had poured everything into, was about to collapse in a way no one could ever imagine. In that moment, everything changed. In a single phone call, a grandmother, a mother, and a family who once epitomized what it meant to be a picture-perfect household were thrown into a nightmare they could never wake from. But it wasn't the first time the darkness had crept in. It was just the first time it had been revealed. Before tragedy struck, before the world knew their name, the Harper family was what most would consider perfect. The kind of family you see in commercials, the kind that makes everyone else wish they could have just a fraction of that happiness. Lillian Harper was the heart of the family. As a matriarch, she had a way of bringing everyone together. A mother of 3, Lillian had always known how to make a home feel like a sanctuary. Her children, especially her son Mark, revered her. They often joked that their home was like a magnet, always full of friends and family, always the place to be. If there was ever a need for a comforting hug or advice, it was always Lillian who was there. Mark married Danielle, a woman whose smile seemed to light up the room, and together they built a life filled with the promise of everything good. Their first few years of marriage were full of excitement, hope, and anticipation. Danielle, who had always dreamed of becoming a mother, was overjoyed when she found out she was pregnant. She carried the pregnancy with a radiant glow, and Mark couldn't hide his excitement as they prepared for the arrival of their first child. A year later, Danielle gave birth to their first son, Kyle. The new parents were in awe of their little boy, and every day was an adventure as they adjusted to life as a family of 3. They found joy in the simplest moments, Kyle's first smile, his first steps, and the sound of his laughter filling the house. It seemed as though their happiness was limitless. Then, 2 years later, they welcomed their second son, Marcus. The family was complete, or so it seemed. The brothers were close in age and immediately became inseparable. Kyle, the older of the two, would protect Marcus fiercely, and Marcus, though quiet, would always look to his older brother for guidance. They were the epitome of brotherly love, sharing everything, puzzles, toys, and eventually secrets. Lillian had been married once, but her husband passed away early, leaving her to raise her children with strength and compassion. When Mark married Danielle, she welcomed her with open arms, embracing her as a daughter. Danielle and Lillian developed a close bond, spending hours together talking about everything from recipes to life's deeper meanings, sometimes staying up late into the night over cups of tea. Danielle often leaned on Lillian for advice, on parenting, on how to hold the family together in the face of life's inevitable ups and downs. In Lillian, Danielle found a mother figure, someone who knew just how to help without smothering. The Harper family was a model of warmth and love, and to the outside world, they were the epitome of what a family should be. Neighbors often marveled at the way they interacted, how everyone seemed so connected, so at ease. The family dinners, the holiday gatherings, the shared moments that spoke of a love so deep and unconditional that it could withstand anything. Mark and Lillian were pillars of the community, always giving, always there for others. They organized charity events, helped neighbors in need, and always made time for people. The Harper home was a sanctuary to many, a place where everyone was welcome. As for Kyle and Marcus, the boys were active in school and loved by all. Kyle, with his athletic build, was a standout on the football team, always giving his best and showing leadership on and off the field. Marcus, the artistic one, found comfort in his sketches and dreams of becoming an artist one day. The boys seemed to have everything ahead of them, bright futures, supportive parents, and a loving home. Every evening, the Harper family would gather around the dinner table, where they would talk about their day. Danielle would recount stories from her work as a nurse, Lillian would share what she had been up to in her garden, and the boys would chat about their school experiences, their friends, and their growing interests. The laughter around the table was infectious, and it created an atmosphere of warmth and security that no one could touch. But despite the perfect facade, cracks began to appear, subtle at first, then undeniable. Something was changing within the family, and no one could foresee the devastating events that would soon unravel the life they had worked so hard to build. Mark's death came suddenly and without warning. A heart attack, they said. He was only in his early 40s, active, healthy, nobody saw it coming. One moment, the family was whole. The next, Danielle was a widow, and Kyle and Marcus were fatherless. The grief was paralyzing. Lillian took charge immediately. She was the first to arrive at the hospital, the first to make the calls, the one who held Danielle while she screamed into her chest. "We'll get through this," she whispered over and over. "I'm here now. I've got you." And for a while, it was true. She did step up in ways no one else could. She helped with the boys, moved into the house temporarily, just to help, and made sure meals were cooked, laundry was done, and the family stayed afloat through the fog of grief. But slowly, subtly, things began to shift. Lillian wasn't just helping anymore, she was taking over. She insisted the boys sleep in her room when they had nightmares. She asked for more and more one-on-one time with them, taking them out separately, then bringing them back late and vague about where they had been. Danielle, still deep in mourning, chalked it up to a grandmother's need to keep her son's memory alive. But something about it didn't sit right. Kyle and Marcus had always been close. Being only 2 years apart, they were more like best friends than siblings. They shared secrets, games, dreams of the future. But after Mark's death, and as Lillian grew more involved, Danielle started to notice a distance growing between them. They no longer laughed the way they used to. They weren't spending as much time together. Instead, each boy seemed more withdrawn, more isolated. Danielle would walk into a room and find one of them whispering with Lillian, only for both to fall silent the moment they saw her. She found herself excluded from conversations, from decisions. And Lillian, once warm and inclusive, now spoke to Danielle like an outsider in her own home. It all reached a breaking point one evening when Danielle overheard Marcus crying behind his closed bedroom door. She knocked gently, but he didn't answer. When she opened the door, he jumped, startled. His phone slipped from his hand. Danielle picked it up, and what she saw made her skin go cold. It was a message thread, with Lillian. The texts were disturbing, inappropriate. Lillian using words no grandmother ever should. Telling Marcus how special he was, how much she loved him, phrases laced with affection that crossed every imaginable line. Danielle's hands shook. She scrolled further and found photos. Posed selfies of Lillian in nightwear. Messages laced with jealousy. Commands to keep things secret. Marcus was pale, his eyes red. He tried to take the phone back, but Danielle was frozen, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She couldn't believe what she was reading. Her knees gave out as she dropped onto the bed. "How long has this been going on?" she whispered. Marcus hesitated, then whispered, "Since after Dad died." Danielle's mind raced. She couldn't breathe. And then she asked the question she was terrified to know the answer to, "Kyle too?" Marcus looked away. And that was it. That was all she needed. Danielle confronted Lillian that night, but it didn't go as planned. Lillian denied everything. Laughed it off. Said boys lie, said Danielle was unstable. But there was something in her eyes, an unrepentant glint, something smug, that made Danielle's blood boil. It wasn't just denial. It was confidence. As if Lillian believed she could get away with it. As if she had control over the boys, and Danielle was just an obstacle in her twisted little world. And in that moment, Danielle made a decision that would change everything. That night, Danielle couldn't sleep. The walls felt like they were closing in. Every creak of the house made her tense. Her mind spun in loops, memories of Mark, the boys as toddlers, holidays around the table, Lillian laughing in the kitchen, all twisted now by what she knew. What she had seen. Her mother-in-law, someone who had once been a second mother to her, had violated the most sacred trust. She had manipulated grief, snuck into the broken spaces left behind by death, and poisoned them. Danielle watched Kyle and Marcus the next morning. Their faces were tired, blank. They wouldn't look her in the eye. Something about them looked small, shrunk down by shame and fear. She wondered how long they had carried this weight. How many nights they had lied awake, confused and afraid, too scared to say anything. She felt a new kind of heartbreak. Not just grief, not just rage. Guilt. That she hadn't seen it sooner. That she had trusted Lillian too much. That she hadn't protected her boys. She called a therapist. Quietly. She didn't tell Lillian. She made an appointment and took the boys out separately, both of them, giving them space to speak. What came out in those sessions was even worse than she'd imagined. Lillian had not only touched them, she had groomed them for months. Fed them stories about love. Told them they were hers now. That no one would understand. That their father would have wanted it this way. It was sick. Twisted. Evil. Danielle felt something in her break. She called the police. She filed a report. She turned over the texts, the photos. But justice, as she quickly learned, doesn't move fast, especially when the accused is a well-respected older woman in a quiet neighborhood. And especially when the boys, confused and traumatized, weren't always consistent in their stories. Lillian found out. She found out about the report, the therapy, the accusations. And she exploded. She screamed at Danielle in the driveway one afternoon, loud enough for neighbors to hear. She called her unstable, jealous, mentally ill. She accused her of turning the boys against her. Of ruining a good family. That night, Lillian tried to take the boys. She showed up unannounced, pounding on the door. Danielle refused to let her in, but Kyle, scared, unsure, unlocked the back door. Lillian slipped inside, tried to lead them out with her. Told them they didn't have to stay there. That they belonged with her. That she loved them more. Danielle called 911. It was the final straw. The courts placed a temporary protection order against Lillian. She was forced to stay away from the boys, pending investigation. She moved back into her own home and for weeks, there was silence. A tense, dangerous silence. Danielle looked over her shoulder everywhere she went. She installed cameras. Changed the locks. Slept with the lights on. But she also started to rebuild her boys, slowly. Carefully. The house became quieter. The boys smiled a little more. Marcus took up painting again. Kyle started playing basketball in the driveway. There was still so much healing left to do, but for the first time, Danielle could see the possibility of peace. Until the night it all burned down. Danielle didn't remember falling asleep. She'd been on the couch, watching something on her laptop, too tired to make it to bed. What woke her was the sound. A faint, sharp crackling. Then the smell, smoke. Not from the kitchen. Not a candle. Real, thick, burning smoke. She sat up, disoriented. Then she heard the boys coughing upstairs. The fire was already inside the house. She screamed their names. Stumbled up the stairs. Flames licked the walls, smoke poured from the hallway. She got to Kyle's room first, pulled him out coughing. Marcus was already climbing out the window. She shoved both boys down the roof toward the tree they used to climb in the summer. They all made it outside barefoot, trembling. The front door was ablaze. And that's when she saw her. Standing across the street. Watching. Lillian. Calm. Still. Not moving. In her hand, a red gas can. Danielle screamed. Charged toward her. But Lillian didn't run. She simply turned and walked down the street, disappearing into the dark. The fire trucks came. The police. The house was gone. Danielle told them everything. The threats. The obsession. The texts. The boys confirmed it. Neighbors confirmed the screaming. The protection order violation. But Lillian was nowhere to be found. She vanished. For days, the city searched. Her photo was plastered across every news channel. Danielle was forced to move in with a relative in another town. The boys were traumatized all over again. And then, 1 week later, in a cheap motel 20 miles outside the city, Lillian was found. She'd taken her own life. Left a letter. No apology. Just one final message. They were mine. For a while, life went quiet again. After the fire and Lillian's disappearance, Danielle and the boys moved into a small rental house outside the city. It wasn't home, not yet, but it was safe. Kyle and Marcus returned to therapy, and Danielle started working nights at a local diner to stay afloat. She stayed vigilant, though. Even after Lillian's body was found in the motel and the death ruled a suicide, Danielle didn't believe it. Something in her gut told her it wasn't over. Lillian had always been a manipulator. A master of control. But weeks passed. Then months. No signs. No whispers. Nothing but silence. Until the night of Marcus's 15th birthday. It was supposed to be quiet, just the three of them, some pizza, a movie, and cupcakes with candles. Kyle had made a card by hand. Danielle had picked up a small Bluetooth speaker he'd been eyeing. They were finally beginning to feel like a family again, one that could survive what they'd been through. Danielle stepped outside to take out the trash after dinner, and froze. There, across the street, under the dim yellow wash of the street lamp, was a woman. Her posture. Her hair. The way she stood, perfectly still. It was Lillian. Danielle couldn't breathe. Her heart slammed against her chest. She rubbed her eyes, thinking it was a hallucination, trauma playing tricks on her. But it wasn't. Lillian was alive. She hadn't died in that motel. The letter, the news reports, it had all been staged. Another manipulation. Another trick. Danielle ran back inside. Locked the doors. Told the boys to stay upstairs. She called the police. Again. But when they arrived, Lillian was gone. No trace. 2 days later, Kyle found a letter slid under the back door. No envelope. Just a single page. I will always be their true home. You can't keep them from me. Danielle snapped. Something inside her, some wall that had held strong for so long, finally crumbled. This woman had taken her husband's death and used it. She had stolen her children's innocence. Burned down their home. And now, even after death, she still wasn't done. She wasn't going to wait anymore. 3 nights later, Danielle saw her again, this time, near the woods behind the rental house. She didn't call the police. She didn't scream. She quietly grabbed the baseball bat by the front door and slipped outside, barefoot, heart pounding. She followed her. Through the trees. Into the clearing. Lillian stood near the edge of a small creek, her back to Danielle, whispering to herself. Or maybe to someone who wasn't there. Danielle stepped on a branch. Lillian turned. She smiled. That smile, the same smile she had once given Danielle in the hospital waiting room, in her kitchen, on Christmas morning. The same smile she had twisted and weaponized to destroy everything. You know they still love me, she said softly. Danielle didn't answer. She couldn't. And before Lillian could speak again, Danielle lifted the bat and brought it down with everything she had. Once. Twice. 3 times. Lillian crumpled to the ground. Danielle dropped the bat, fell to her knees, and wept. When the police arrived, called by a neighbor who had heard screaming, Danielle didn't run. She was still there, shaking, covered in blood and mud, whispering the same words over and over. She wasn't going to stop. She was never going to stop. The story shook the country. A mother driven to murder. A grandmother who had preyed on her own family. A home destroyed by obsession and manipulation. Kyle and Marcus were taken in by their aunt, Danielle's sister, while the legal system unraveled what had happened. Danielle's trial became national news. But when the full story was revealed, texts, therapy reports, court filings, the fire, sympathy poured in. In the end, the court didn't label Danielle a cold-blooded killer. They saw her for what she was. A mother who lost everything, and had no choice but to protect what was left. The courtroom was packed from day one. News vans lined the street outside. Reporters shoved microphones toward anyone walking in or out of the courthouse. The story was too explosive to ignore. A suburban mother accused of bludgeoning her own mother-in-law to death in the woods behind her home. But as the facts unraveled, the public sentiment began to shift. Danielle sat silently through the arraignment, her wrists shackled, her eyes hollow. Her attorney, a seasoned criminal defense lawyer named Teresa Maddox, requested no media questions, no interviews, no press briefings. "Let the facts speak," she said. Not the headlines. But the headlines were relentless. Family matriarch murdered by daughter-in-law. Twisted triangle, mother, sons, and grandmother at center of chilling crime. Was it murder or mercy? The prosecution charged Danielle with second-degree murder. They painted her as unstable, overly protective, emotionally volatile, a woman who had snapped. They acknowledged Lillian's questionable past but claimed Danielle had taken justice into her own hands. The legal system existed, the district attorney said. And she bypassed it with a baseball bat. But Teresa fought back. In opening statements, she didn't shy away from what Danielle had done. She looked the jury in the eye and said, "Yes. My client killed Lillian DeWitt. And we'll show you exactly why she had no other choice." Then came the evidence. Therapists testified first. Clinical psychologists brought in their session notes from Kyle and Marcus. They spoke about grooming, manipulation, and psychological coercion. How Lillian used grief and loneliness to confuse the boys. How she blurred the lines between care and abuse. How she made herself essential in their lives, only to trap them in silence. Then came the digital forensics team. They retrieved years of texts, emails, photos, deleted messages, all from Lillian's devices and cloud backups. One message, in particular, made the courtroom gasp. "You don't belong to her. You belong to me now. No one else understands you the way I." Started in 3 separate places: kitchen, hallway, stairwell. The signature of arson. Surveillance footage was shown from a nearby neighbor's doorbell camera. It didn't capture Lillian clearly, but the timestamp aligned perfectly with the moment Danielle saw her across the street before the fire. A handwriting expert confirmed that the threatening letters sent to Kyle and Marcus matched samples of Lillian's signature. The defense called Danielle to the stand last. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom when she spoke. She talked about her husband, Mark, the love of her life. How his death broke her, but Lillian had stepped in like a savior. She detailed the slow shift, the red flags, the quiet control. Her voice cracked when she described the day she found the messages on Kyle's phone. The texts. The photos. The horror. The guilt. The fire. And finally, that last night. Seeing Lillian outside. The whispers. The bat. The sound of it all ending. "I didn't kill her for revenge," she said softly. "I killed her because she wouldn't stop. And I knew, if I let her go again, she would take my sons from me. Not by law. But piece by piece. Like she already had. The courtroom sat frozen. The prosecution cross-examined. Tried to press on intent. Why not call the police again? Why not run away with your children? Danielle looked the DA in the eye and answered, because we already ran. And she still found us. She burned our house down. She watched us from the street. She came back from the dead. How many chances was I supposed to give her? It took the jury 4 days to deliberate. On the 5th day, the foreman read the verdict. Not guilty of second-degree murder. Guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Danielle collapsed in her chair, tears pouring down her face. Her sons, sitting quietly behind her, rushed forward and hugged her as deputies allowed. The sentence? Time served. 5 years probation. No further jail time. Mandatory psychological treatment. The judge's final words were solemn. This court does not condone violence. But it recognizes human limits. And Mrs. DeWitt, you reached yours. Outside, crowds waited. Some held signs that said, "Justice for Danielle." Others carried posters that read, "Protect mothers, believe children." It wasn't just a trial anymore, it was a movement. A documentary followed within 6 months. Book deals were offered. But Danielle declined them all. She wanted peace, not publicity. She moved with Kyle and Marcus to another state. Started over under a new name. The boys enrolled in a charter school, and for the first time in years, their laughter came naturally again. They never visited Lillian's grave. Not once. Because there are some stories that don't deserve to be remembered in flowers, but in warnings. And this was one of them. If this story shook you the way it shook us, don't scroll past. Share this video so more people can understand how manipulation can hide behind family ties. Comment your thoughts. Was Danielle a victim, a protector, or something else entirely? And if you haven't yet, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We have more real, raw, and gripping true crime stories coming your way every week.